Have you ever felt invisible, judged in an instant by someone who knows nothing about you? What happens when that judgment is passed on one of the most powerful, yet unassuming women in the country? This isn't a story about someone raising their voice or causing a scene. It's about a CEO, a multi-million-dollar contract, and a flight full of people who had no idea their travel plans were about to be erased. It's about how a single silent gesture from a woman told to use the economy line triggered a corporate meltdown at 30,000 feet, all before a single passenger had even boarded the plane. Stay with me, because the quietest people often have the most devastating impact. The air in Terminal 4 of Los Angeles International Airport was a thick soup of human anxiety, smelling of stale coffee jet fuel and the faint, sweet scent of Cinnabon. It was a symphony of chaos, the frantic clatter of rolling suitcases with broken wheels, the garbled pronouncements of gate changes over the intercom, the wail of a toddler who had been denied a third bag of potato chips. In the midst of this manufactured pandemonium stood Dr. Isabella Monroe, a portrait of serene calm. To the casual observer, she was utterly unremarkable. She wore simple dark grey joggers made of a soft technical fabric, a plain black long-sleeved shirt, and comfortable-looking but expensive on-cloud sneakers. Her hair was pulled back into a neat, practical bun, and the only piece of jewelry on her person was a simple, elegant silver watch on her left wrist. There was no flashy designer handbag, no ostentatious display of wealth. She looked like a yoga instructor or a university professor on her way to a conference. She was in fact the founder and CEO of Monroe Dynamics, a company that had revolutionized time-sensitive logistical solutions for the biomedical industry. The simple watch on her wrist was a Patek Philippe, a quiet nod to the precision her life demanded. Standing beside her, fidgeting with the strap of his laptop bag, was Liam Peterson. Liam was 26, bright-eyed, and just 6 months into his role as Isabella's executive assistant. He still existed in a state of perpetual awe of his boss. He'd seen her dismantle belligerent corporate attorneys with a single perfectly phrased question. He'd watched her charm a skeptical board of investors into funding a project everyone else deemed impossible. But he'd only ever seen her in the tailored armor of a boardroom. Seeing her like this in travel clothes, blending into the tapestry of everyday life, was a new experience. Flight 762 to New York's JFK is now ready for pre-boarding. A voice crackled overhead. Isabella took a calm sip of her water. "That's us, Liam. Let's go." They were flying Phoenix Air, a major carrier with whom Monroe Dynamics had an exclusive 9-figure annual contract. Her company was their single largest corporate account on the West Coast. This contract wasn't for executives flying to meetings. It was for the core of her business. Monroe Dynamics shipped irreplaceable life-critical materials, cryopreserved organs for transplant, patient-specific cancer treatments with a shelf life of only a few hours, and rare radioactive isotopes for advanced medical imaging. Phoenix Air's cargo division was for all intents and purposes a subsidiary of Monroe Dynamics' will. Every Phoenix Air employee who handled cargo was trained on Monroe Dynamics' proprietary protocols. The partnership was a deep, intricate, and immensely profitable one for the airline. Isabella and Liam held first-class tickets. It was a non-negotiable company policy for any employee on a cross-country flight involving a live delivery, as this one did. In the cargo hold of this very plane, secured in a state-of-the-art biostable transport unit, was a set of pediatric donor lungs destined for a 7-year-old girl at Mount Sinai in New York. The surgery was scheduled for the moment they landed. The margin for error was 0. They approached the gate where 2 distinct lines were forming. On the right, a long snaking queue for the main cabin was already swelling. On the left, A short, sparse line was marked by a plush blue rope and a sign that read, "Priority Access First Class Military Personnel and Phoenix Gold Members." Isabella led the way to the priority line. There were only 3 other people in front of them. The gate agent, a woman in her late 40s with tired eyes, and a name tag that read Brenda, was scanning boarding passes with a practiced, weary motion. Her smile was a thin, painted-on line that didn't reach her eyes. She radiated an aura of someone who had dealt with one too many entitled travelers in her career and had long since run out of patience. When it was Isabella's turn, she stepped forward and held out her phone, the digital boarding pass glowing on the screen. Brenda didn't even look at the phone. Her eyes flickered over Isabella's simple attire, from her sneakers up to her unadorned face, and a faint, almost imperceptible sneer tightened her lips. "Honey," she said, her voice dripping with a syrupy, condescending sweetness, "the economy line is over there." She gestured with a flick of her wrist towards the massive queue on the right, not even bothering to make eye contact. "This is for our priority guests." The word honey hung in the air, a small, casual insult designed to put Isabella in her place. Liam's face flushed with indignation. He immediately stepped forward, ready to intervene. "Excuse me." "She's in, Isabella." Put a hand gently on his arm, a silent command to stand down. Her expression didn't change. She remained placid, her gaze fixed on Brenda. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't protest. She simply held her phone out, the first-class designation clearly visible on the screen. Brenda sighed a gust of theatrical impatience. "Look, I don't have time for this. If you don't have a priority boarding pass, you need to move to the other line and let these people board." She still hadn't looked at the screen. Her judgment was made, and in her mind, it was final. The woman in the joggers did not belong here. The man behind Isabella, a portly gentleman in a shiny suit, huffed impatiently. "Can we get a move on?" Brenda took this as her cue. She looked at Isabella with hardened eyes. "Last time, miss. The back of the line. Now." The dismissal was total. It was a judgment not just on her clothes, but on her race, her gender, her very presence in that space. In Brenda's world, power looked a certain way, and Isabella Monroe did not fit the description. Isabella's gaze never wavered from Brenda's face. The air around her seemed to still. The ambient noise of the terminal faded into a dull roar. Liam could feel the temperature drop, a sudden, inexplicable chill in the air. His boss, the woman who could command boardrooms with her quiet intensity, was focusing that entire intensity onto this one oblivious gate agent. Slowly, deliberately, Isabella lowered her phone. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She didn't show Brenda the boarding pass that would have proven her right. The opportunity for that had passed. A line had been crossed, not of airport procedure, but of fundamental respect. Instead, she unlocked her phone with a flick of her thumb. Her fingers moved with practiced speed, tapping out a short, cryptic message. She then navigated to her contacts, found the name David Chen, COO, and pressed send. Then she did one more thing. She took a single step back from the priority line, a silent concession. She turned to Liam, her face as calm and unreadable as a deep lake. "Change of plans, Liam?" She said, her voice even and quiet, yet carrying the weight of a dropped anchor. "We're not flying today." Brenda watched her go, a smug little smile playing on her lips. She had won. She had kept her line pure. She turned to the next passenger, oblivious to the fact that she hadn't just insulted a passenger. She had lit the fuse on a corporate bomb, and the silent gesture of a single text message was the spark. The shockwave was coming. The text message that left Dr. Isabella Monroe's phone was deceptively simple. It contained only 5 words. Execute Protocol Indigo. Phoenix Air, immediate. In San Francisco, at the global headquarters of Monroe Dynamics, Chief Operating Officer David Chen was in a meeting finalizing a new European logistics route. His phone, which was always on his person and set to a specific vibration pattern for messages from Isabella, buzzed discreetly in his pocket. He excused himself without a word, his face a mask of professional neutrality. He stepped into the hallway and read the message. His blood ran cold. Protocol Indigo was a name that struck a unique blend of dread and respect into the senior leadership at Monroe Dynamics. It was a corporate doomsday switch. It was the digital equivalent of a submersible captain turning the launch key. It was a pre-planned, fully automated, catastrophic severance of ties with a major partner. It was designed for scenarios of gross negligence or catastrophic failure, a plane crash, a massive data breach, a complete breakdown in contractual obligations. It had been designed by Isabella herself, but it had never not once been used. It was the company's nuclear option. David's mind raced. There must have been a crash, an explosion, a critical cargo loss. He immediately pictured the pediatric lungs on Flight 762. He sprinted back to his office, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Cynthia," he yelled to his assistant, "get me the real-time status of Phoenix Air Flight 762 from LAX, and get the organ transplant team at Mount Sinai on a priority line." Now he sat at his terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He brought up the Protocol Indigo dashboard. A stark black screen appeared with a single prompt: "Confirm execution. Phoenix Air, PHX authorization." Monroe. David took a deep breath. Isabella's command was absolute. There was no questioning it. His job was to execute and manage the fallout. He typed his own authorization code and hit enter. A cascade of digital events, meticulously pre-programmed, began to unfold with terrifying speed. At Phoenix Air corporate headquarters in Dallas, a senior vice president of corporate accounts, a man named Robert Sterling, was just finishing his lunch when a series of red alerts began flashing on his desktop. An automated email with the subject line, "Immediate contract termination, Monroe Dynamics Act 774B1, appeared in his inbox. It was boilerplate, brutally efficient, and legally airtight, citing clause 34B of their agreement, termination for cause, due to actions which fundamentally undermine operational integrity and trust. Simultaneously, the accounting department system registered a massive automated chargeback. Monroe Dynamics system was electronically clawing back all prepaid fees for the next quarter's cargo shipments, a sum totaling just over $28 million. The airline's proprietary cargo booking system, which interfaced directly with Monroe Dynamics, suddenly went dark. All scheduled shipments from Monroe Dynamics for the next 6 months, hundreds of flights a day, globally vanished. The system began flagging dozens of upcoming flights that were now suddenly unprofitable, as their most valuable cargo had been vaporized. Sterling's phone rang. It was the head of the cargo division. He was screaming. "What the hell is going on, Bob? We just lost every Monroe shipment. They're gone. The system is a sea of red. It's a bloodbath." Back at LAX Terminal 4, Brenda the gate agent was continuing to board the flight, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. "Have a nice flight," she'd drone, scanning another pass. "Enjoy your trip." Suddenly, the computer screen in front of her flickered. A new message flashed in bold red letters. "Boarding suspended. Gate authority revoked." Her scanner beeped angrily and refused to accept the next boarding pass. "What in the world?" she muttered, trying to click the message away. It wouldn't disappear. Her supervisor, a harried-looking man named Frank Davies, came rushing down the jet bridge ramp, his face pale and slick with sweat. "Brenda, what happened here? What did you do?" he demanded, his voice a frantic whisper. "What did I do?" Brenda retorted, offended. "Nothing. The system just froze up. It's probably another IT glitch." "This is not a glitch," Frank hissed, looking around at the confused passengers. "I just got a call from Dallas. Corporate is in meltdown. They say it originated from this gate. From this flight, they're screaming about Monroe Dynamics. Did you have any interaction with anyone from Monroe Dynamics?" Brenda's mind went blank. The name sounded vaguely familiar, like a company she'd seen on cargo manifests. But she wasn't a cargo agent. She dealt with people. No. No one important. Just the usual bunch. Some suits, a few families. Her eyes scanned the remaining people in the priority line, then the sea of faces in economy. She couldn't place anyone of significance. Her brain, conditioned by years of routine, had already discarded the image of the woman in the joggers as unimportant. Meanwhile, the main departure board for the entire terminal began to update. Next to Phoenix Air 762, JFK, the on-time status switched to a glaring, ominous yellow, delayed. A moment later, it switched again to status pending. Passengers began to murmur. Phones came out. The tide of controlled chaos in the terminal was beginning to turn toward genuine unrest. Isabella and Liam were standing near a Hudson News, watching the scene unfold from a distance. Liam was staring at the departure board, his mouth slightly agape. He looked at his boss, who was calmly checking something on her phone. "Dr. Monroe." "What's happening?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "What's happening, Liam?" she said, finally, looking up from her screen. Her eyes cool and steady is a teachable moment. When someone shows you they do not value your business, you believe them, and you act accordingly. Liam's phone buzzed. It was an alert from the company's automated travel system. "Your booking on PHX 762 has been cancelled. Please await alternative arrangements." He looked back at the gate, where Frank Davies was now frantically speaking into his walkie-talkie, his eyes darting around the crowd like a cornered animal. It was then that Frank's walkie-talkie crackled with a voice from the airport's central operations tower. The voice was strained with panic. "Gate 44B, be advised. We have an executive order from Phoenix Corporate. They're grounding Flight 762. "Grounding it," Frank squawked into the radio. "On what grounds? The plane is ready. The crew is on board." The voice on the other end was grim. "The grounds are that its primary cargo has just been legally repossessed by the shipper, and the shipper Monroe Dynamics has just terminated every contract they have with this airline, effective immediately. They're invoking a hazardous materials clause and are sending their own team to retrieve their property from the cargo hold. Until that happens, your plane is not going anywhere." Frank stared blankly at the chaos he was now presiding over. Repossessed cargo, a terminated contract worth millions, all originating from his gate in the last 10 minutes. It made no sense. It was impossible. He scanned the crowd again, his desperation growing. Who could possibly have that kind of power? His eyes landed on the portly man in the shiny suit who had been in the priority line. Was it him? He started to walk toward him. But then his gaze drifted past the man, and he saw them. Standing quietly by the newsstand, a young man who looked like a nervous intern, and a black woman in simple athletic wear. He saw her look at the departure board, then back down at her phone, her expression utterly serene. A cold, horrifying realization began to dawn in Frank Davies's mind. Power didn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wore joggers, and his gate agent had just told it to go to the back of the line. The chaos at Gate 44B was no longer a quiet, simmering affair. It had boiled over. Passengers sensing that status pending was a corporate euphemism for cancelled crowded the desk, their voices a rising chorus of frustration and anger. "What is going on? I have a connecting flight in New York. This is unacceptable. We demand an answer." Brenda was completely overwhelmed. Her painted-on smile had melted away, replaced by a deer-in-the-headlights terror. She was a cog in a machine, trained to handle routine problems like seat changes and baggage fees. She had no script for a corporate apocalypse. Frank Davies, meanwhile, was having the worst conversation of his professional life. Robert Sterling, the SVP from Dallas, was on his cell phone, and his voice was a low, dangerous growl that promised swift and terrible consequences. "Frank, I need you to understand what you've done," Sterling seethed through the phone. "Monroe Dynamics isn't just a client. They are our lifeblood for the entire West Coast Biomed corridor. We have planes in the air right now, all over the world, filled with their cargo. This single action has jeopardized our entire logistics network. I need you to tell me right now who from Monroe Dynamics was at your gate." Frank's eyes darted back to the woman by the Hudson News. It couldn't be. It was too absurd. He had spent his career bowing to men in expensive suits and learning to spot a platinum card at 20 paces. His entire professional instinct screamed that this woman was a nobody. I don't know, sir," he stammered. There was no one who identified themselves as being from— "Their CEO was on your flight manifest, Frank," Sterling roared, his voice cracking with rage. "Dr. Isabella Monroe Forbes' most innovative leader in logistics, 4 years running. She was a guest of the airline flagged for special assistance. Not that she ever uses it. Now find her, get on your goddamn knees and fix this." The name hit Frank like a physical blow. Dr. Isabella Monroe. He'd seen her picture in magazines. He remembered it now, a feature in Wired about her company's groundbreaking work. But in the photo, she had been in a sharp power suit, standing in a gleaming laboratory. The woman in his terminal looked nothing like that. His blood turned to ice water. He looked at Brenda, whose face was a mask of confusion. "Brenda," he said, his voice trembling. "The woman you sent to the economy line. The black woman in the joggers. Did you see where she went?" Brenda blinked, the memory slowly filtering through the fog of her panic. "Her. She's just standing over there. By the bookstore." She said it with a hint of her earlier dismissiveness, still not grasping the magnitude of her blunder. Frank didn't reply. He pocketed his phone and began walking his gait stiff and robotic toward Isabella Monroe. He felt like a man walking toward his own execution. The angry shouts of the passengers, the frantic announcements, it all faded into a dull buzz. His entire world had shrunk to the space between him and the calm, unassuming woman who was now checking the time on her simple silver watch. As he approached, Liam saw him coming and instinctively took a protective step in front of Isabella. "Dr. Monroe," Frank said, his voice cracking. He was sweating profusely now, his uniform collar feeling like a noose. Isabella looked up from her watch, her expression neutral. "Yes, I am Frank Davies, the station manager for Phoenix Air here at LAX." He was wringing his hands, a gesture of pure desperation. "There has been a terrible misunderstanding at the gate, a catastrophic error in judgment on the part of my staff." He shot a venomous glare back at Brenda, who was watching them, her jaw now hanging slack as the pieces began to click into place in her mind. The color drained from her face. "It was not a misunderstanding," Mr. Davies. Isabella replied, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the airport noise. "Your employee was very clear. She assessed me, made a judgment, and gave me an instruction. I simply chose to accept her assessment." "Accept her? What do you mean?" Frank asked, bewildered. "She assessed that my patronage was not a priority for Phoenix Air. I have therefore taken my non-priority patronage elsewhere. Permanently." The word permanently landed with the finality of a gavel strike. Frank flinched as if he'd been slapped. "Dr. Monroe, please." He begged, his professionalism crumbling into raw pleading. "We can fix this. We will get you on the plane immediately. I will have the agent responsible terminated on the spot. We will offer you compensation, a lifetime of free flights, whatever it takes. We have a 20-year relationship with your company." Isabella let the silence stretch for a moment, forcing him to stand there in his own desperate sweat. Liam watched, mesmerized. She wasn't angry. She wasn't gloating. She was dissecting the situation like a surgeon examining a diseased organ. "Mr. Davies," she finally said, "this is no longer about my wounded feelings or your employees' lack of training. This is about a systemic failure. The misunderstanding, as you call it, revealed a fatal flaw in your service paradigm. My company ships materials where a delay of 1 hour can be the difference between a successful organ transplant and a child's death. We rely on partners who are efficient, precise, and respectful at every single level of their organization, from the cargo bay to the cockpit to the boarding gate. What your employee showed me was not just personal prejudice. It was a symptom of a corporate culture that is at best sloppy and at worst discriminatory. That introduces a level of operational risk I am no longer willing to accept." She paused, letting the business school lecture sink in. "The contract is terminated. My legal team has already sent the official notice. It is irrevocable." Frank looked like he was going to be physically ill. He had been sent to put out a fire, but he had arrived to find only a smoking crater. Suddenly, a new element of panic entered his eyes. "But the cargo your shipment on this flight, it's critical, isn't it? The manifest says it's a level 1 biotransport." This was the twist Liam hadn't fully grasped. He knew about the lungs, of course, but he hadn't connected the dots in the heat of the moment. By cancelling the contract, had Dr. Monroe jeopardized the delivery? He looked at his boss, a flicker of doubt in his eyes for the first time. Isabella's expression hardened just for a second. It was the first crack he had seen in her serene facade. She had made a calculated, ruthless decision, and now she had to deal with the life-or-death consequences she had set in motion. "Yes, it is critical," she said, her voice dropping to a steely whisper. "And since your airline can no longer be trusted to fulfill its obligations, I am managing it myself." She turned away from the stunned station manager and put her phone to her ear. It had been ringing silently against her palm. "David," she said, her voice now a rapid-fire sequence of commands. "Indigo is executed. Good. Now activate Helios. I need a G5550 on the tarmac at the LAX private suite in 40 minutes. Full medical transport capabilities. I want our best retrieval team at the Phoenix cargo bay in 10. I'm sending you the authorization codes now. Get Mount Sinai on the line. Tell Dr. Anya Sharma that the package is still en route, but our ETA will be updated. We are not letting this girl down." She hung up and looked at Liam. The calm, detached observer was gone. In her place was the CEO, a commander deploying her troops. "Liam, get on the phone with ground transport. I need a black car at the arrivals level in 20 minutes. Tell them it's a code Crimson transit. They'll know what that means." Liam jolted into action, nodded, and fumbled for his phone. Isabella turned back to the ghost-white Frank Davies, who had overheard her entire conversation. He was staring at her with a mixture of terror and awe. She had not only fired his airline, she had, in the space of a 10-minute phone call, chartered a private medical jet and mobilized an extraction team to seize cargo from his company's plane. She was operating on a level he couldn't even comprehend. "My team will be here shortly to take possession of our property, Mr. Davies," she said coolly. I expect your full and unconditional cooperation. If they encounter any resistance from your ground crew, your security, or your union reps, I will make one more phone call. That call will be to the FAA to report a hostile withholding of critical medical materials. I assure you, the fallout from Protocol Indigo will feel like a pleasant summer breeze compared to that." She then walked away, Liam hurrying to keep pace, leaving the station manager standing alone in the middle of a terminal that had become the epicenter of his own personal and professional ruin. Across the way, Brenda was being quietly spoken to by two other airline representatives. Her face was ashen. Her days with Phoenix Air were over. She, Frank, and the entire airline were just beginning to understand the catastrophic consequences of telling the wrong woman to get in the back of the line. The news of the Monroe Dynamics contract termination spread through Phoenix Air's corporate structure like a virus. Traders who monitored airline-adjacent logistics firms caught wind of the sudden, unexplained halt in Monroe's shipping volume. Automated trading algorithms programmed to interpret such a disruption as a sign of catastrophic failure began selling off Phoenix Air stock. In the 20 minutes that followed Isabella's text message, PHX shares dipped by 3%. By the time Isabella was walking away from Frank Davies, the stock had plummeted by 9%, wiping over $400 million from the company's market capitalization. The CEO of Phoenix Air, a man named Mark Ingersoll, found out about the crisis not from his own staff, but from a frantic call from a Wall Street analyst demanding to know if one of his planes had gone down. On the tarmac at LAX, the ground crew of Flight 762 received a bewildering set of new orders. Cease all pre-flight preparations. Await specialized cargo team. Do not under any circumstances approach Cargo Bay 3. Minutes later, two black vans with the subtle Monroe Dynamics logo, a stylized M that resembled a steady heartbeat, sped across the airfield, guided by airport operations vehicles. A team of 6 professionals in quiet, efficient gray jumpsuits emerged. They were not loud or aggressive. They moved with the quiet confidence of special forces. They presented the Phoenix ground crew supervisor with a digital warrant signed by Isabella and co-signed by David Chen, authorizing the immediate retrieval of their property. The document was ironclad. The Phoenix crew, bewildered and intimidated, could only stand back and watch as the Monroe team expertly unlatched the cargo bay, accessed the advanced transport unit, and carefully transferred the container holding the pediatric lungs to their own climate-controlled vehicle. The entire operation took less than 7 minutes. It was a masterclass in precision and efficiency, everything Isabella had accused the airline of lacking. Back in the terminal, the scene had devolved further. Flight 762 was now officially cancelled. The passengers were being told to rebook, their angry shouts echoing through the concourse. Brenda was no longer at the gate. She had been escorted by airport security to a back office, her face a tear-streaked mask of disbelief. Her career, built over 18 years of weary service, had been dismantled in less time than it takes to drink a cup of coffee. She had made a simple mistake, she told herself. A simple assumption. She had no way of knowing, but in a world of consequences, ignorance was no defense. Isabella and Liam were now in a sleek black Escalade, speeding through the labyrinth of service roads that connected the commercial terminals to the private airfields. Liam was silent, still processing the sheer scale of what he had just witnessed. He had seen power in meetings, but that was abstract numbers on a spreadsheet, clauses in a contract. This was real, tangible power. The power to halt the world, to bend the infrastructure of a multi-billion-dollar corporation to your will, all with a few words and a tap on a screen. He finally found his voice. The lungs. Are they going to be okay? The timing? Isabella was looking out the window, her face unreadable. It will be tight, but we will make it. We build redundancies into our redundancies, Liam. Protocol Helios. The private medical jet solution is designed for exactly this kind of partner failure. We have a 30-minute buffer built into the Mount Sinai surgical schedule. We'll burn that buffer, but the delivery will be made. She sounded confident, but Liam could see the tension in her jaw. She had taken a colossal gamble. She had wagered a child's life on a principle. The thought was both terrifying and profoundly admirable. She hadn't done it for ego, he realized. She had done it because an airline that could make such a casual, prejudiced error at the gate could not be trusted with the thousands of life-or-death shipments her company handled every single day. Today, it was a dismissive comment. Tomorrow, it could be a misplaced organ. She had amputated a limb to save the entire body. As their car pulled up to the discreet, luxurious entrance of the private aviation suite, Isabella's phone rang again. The caller ID simply read, Mark Ingersoll. She let it ring 3 times before answering. She put it on speaker. Isabella. The voice was strained, the voice of a man trying to project calm from the epicenter of an earthquake. Mark Ingersoll here. I am speechless. I have just been briefed on the situation at LAX. First and foremost, on behalf of every single employee at Phoenix Air, I want to offer my most profound and sincere apology for the disgraceful treatment you received. I appreciate the call, Mark, Isabella said, her voice devoid of warmth. We are taking immediate and decisive action. Ingersoll continued, his voice speeding up. The employee in question has been terminated. The station manager has been suspended, pending a full investigation. We are launching a mandatory top-to-bottom retraining of all 80,000 holders of our employees on sensitivity service and implicit bias. This is a watershed moment for us. A wake-up call? It sounds like it, Isabella replied evenly. Isabella, please. Ingersoll's voice lost its corporate polish, becoming the raw plea of a man watching his company burn. A 20-year partnership, billions of dollars in shared business. We can't let it end like this over the ignorance of one employee. This was the moment, the negotiation, the point where most CEOs would leverage the situation for a better deal, for financial compensation, for a pound of flesh. Liam leaned forward, eager to hear how she would respond. Mark, Isabella said, and her voice was now tinged with a deep weariness. Let me ask you a question. Was the employee who insulted me today the first employee in your company to ever have a prejudiced thought? Was she the first to ever judge a passenger by the color of their skin or the clothes on their back? Of course not. But... and will she be the last? Isabella cut him off. Even with your new training programs and your investigations, will you be able to guarantee me with 100% certainty that no Monroe Dynamics employee, no critical shipment will ever again be impacted by the simple mistake of one of your staff members? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The only sound was Ingersoll's heavy breathing. He was a CEO. He couldn't make a guarantee like that. It was impossible. I can guarantee that we will do everything in our power, he began, but Isabella cut him off again. That's not good enough. Not for me. Not for the people who depend on my company to deliver. I don't enjoy this, Mark. You have been a decent partner for many years. But the world has changed. The standards have changed. My tolerance for this specific type of risk has become zero. She took a breath. The contract termination stands. There is no negotiation. However, I am not a monster. My COO will be in touch with your team to organize a transition. We will not leave you with grounded planes overnight. We will phase out our cargo over the next 90 days on a schedule of our choosing to ensure minimal disruption to the patients we serve. After that, our relationship is over. Goodbye, Mark." She ended the call before he could reply. She looked at Liam, whose eyes were wide with a new level of understanding. She hadn't just sought revenge. She had offered a structured professional wind-down. She had decapitated the company, but was willing to help organize the funeral. It was the coldest, most professional, most ruthless act of mercy he had ever witnessed. A man in a crisp suit opened the Escalade's door. "Dr. Munro, your jet is fueled and ready. The package is secure on board. We can depart on your command." Isabella nodded as she stepped out of the car and onto the tarmac, where a gleaming Gulfstream G550 waited. The last vestiges of the LAX terminal chaos seemed a world away. She had entered that airport an anonymous traveler and left it a force of nature who had single-handedly brought a corporate giant to its knees. The flight had been cancelled, but her mission was very much alive. The ascent was a smooth, powerful surge into the darkening California sky, a transition from the chaotic realm of the earthbound to the serene kingdom of the upper atmosphere. Inside the cabin of the Gulfstream, the silence was profound, a velvet curtain that descended and muffled the world. It was an engineered tranquility, the antithesis of the terminal they had just departed, a place of jarring announcements, frustrated shouts, and the relentless friction of humanity. Here there was only the faintest whisper of recycled air, and the distant, reassuring hum of the Rolls-Royce engines propelling them eastward at over 500 miles per hour. Liam sat across from Isabella on a supple cream leather seat, the polished dark wood of the fold-out table between them, gleaming under the soft, warm cabin lights. A flight attendant had offered them champagne gourmet sandwiches, a full meal, anything they desired. Liam had reflexively asked for a bottle of sparkling water, which now sat untouched, its condensation tracing a perfect circle on the coaster. He couldn't bring himself to eat or drink. His mind was still processing the sheer scale of the day's events, replaying the sequence from the initial dismissive comment to the global corporate fallout. He had always seen power as something loud, something performed. He'd witnessed it in hostile takeovers discussed on the news, in politicians' thunderous speeches, in the fictionalized shouting matches of boardroom dramas. But what he had witnessed today was different. It was a quiet, almost invisible form of power, structural and absolute. It was the power not of a wrecking ball, but of an architect, who with a single command could erase a wing of the building and reroute its entire foundation. He felt a dizzying mix of awe and a sliver of fear. He was seeing the true nature of the woman he worked for, the cold calculus of consequence that lay beneath her calm, academic demeanor. His thoughts kept circling back to the human cost. He pictured Brenda, the gate agent, her smugness curdling into terror as she was escorted away. He pictured Frank Davies, the station manager, his career likely in tatters. He pictured the anonymous investors who had lost money in the stock dip. Were they all just collateral damage in a war declared over a single ignorant comment? The question of proportionality gnawed at him. Isabella, for her part, seemed to have already moved on. She had her tablet out and was engaged in a silent, efficient flurry of activity. She reviewed the new flight path coordinated with the ground team in New York and read a detailed meteorological report to anticipate any turbulence. In a secured temperature-controlled section at the rear of the cabin, a Monroe Dynamics medical technician, a quiet man named Marcus, sat monitoring a screen that displayed the vitals of the precious cargo. He was the shepherd of this mission, now a physical embodiment of the company's promise. Finally, after nearly an hour of flying through the silent, starry darkness, Liam found his voice. It felt small in the vast quiet of the cabin. She lost her job, he said the words hanging in the air. The gate agent. Brenda. Isabella looked up from her tablet, her gaze steady. She didn't seem surprised by the question. She seemed to have been waiting for it. Yes, Liam. I imagine she did. And Mr. Davies? Liam continued, pressing forward. And the stock price, hundreds of millions of dollars in value gone in an afternoon. All those people. He trailed off, the immensity of it all feeling too large to articulate. He finally asked the question that had been circling in his mind, the question that separated admiration from true understanding. Do you feel bad for them? Isabella set her tablet down on the table with deliberate care. She folded her hands and took a long moment, not for dramatic effect, but as if to give the question the weight it deserved. She looked out the curved window at the ink-black canvas of the night sky. I feel a deep sense of regret that it came to this. She began, her voice measured and thoughtful. I don't derive any satisfaction from a woman like Brenda losing her livelihood. I can guess her story. I'm sure she works long hours for pay that doesn't reflect the stress of her job. I'm sure she deals with rude, entitled people all day long. And I am sure that in her world, she has learned to survive by making quick, cynical judgments about the people who pass in front of her. Her mind created a shortcut, a prejudice to make her world simpler. A person who looks like me isn't supposed to be in a place of privilege. It's the banality of bias, Liam. It's rarely a grand, villainous hatred. It's a million small, lazy, corrosive assumptions. She turned her gaze back to him, and her eyes were intense. But here is the crucial distinction. I can have empathy for her personal situation, but I can have zero tolerance for the professional consequences of her actions. My decision was not about punishing Brenda. It was about protecting this company, our employees, and most importantly, the patients at the end of our supply chain from the next Brenda. And the one after that, because her simple mistake revealed a systemic rot. It told me that Phoenix Air's culture was not robust enough to prevent personal prejudice from infecting professional responsibility, and that in our line of work is a terminal disease. The jet dipped slightly as it navigated a patch of unsteady air. Isabella didn't seem to notice. Power isn't about making a scene, she continued, picking up the thread. Anyone can yell at a gate agent. That's performative anger. It makes you feel better for a moment, but it changes nothing about the underlying system. True power, structural power, is the ability to change the system itself. It's about understanding the contracts, the financial levers, the operational dependencies, the invisible architecture of the world. And it is about having the foresight to build a tool like Protocol Indigo. It's a terrible, beautiful weapon, and the immense burden of leadership is knowing that you are the only one who can decide when to use it. Her phone buzzed with a specific, discreet tone. It was the satellite link. She glanced at the screen. David Chen. She answered, putting it on speaker. Isabella David's voice was crisp, professional. Mount Sinai is on the line. Dr. Sharma is getting anxious about the revised ETA. The surgical team is prepped and waiting. She needs your absolute assurance. This was it. The moment of truth. The consequences of her decision were now knocking at the door. Put her through, David Isabella said calmly. A moment later, a new voice, female and taut with stress, filled the cabin. Dr. Monroe Anya Sharma. Dr. Sharma. I'm here. What's your status? Isabella's voice had shifted. It was now imbued with an unshakable command, the voice of a field general speaking to a trusted lieutenant. We're ready, Isabella, but the clock is ticking. Your original 30-minute buffer is now down to 10. If your ground team hits one red light in Queens, we could be in trouble. Are you positive you can make this window? Anya Isabella said, her voice a bedrock of certainty. My vehicle will be met by a police escort at the JFK private terminal. The route has been cleared. Your package will be in your hands in exactly 58 minutes. You have my word. Prepare your team. Understood, Dr. Sharma said, the tension in her voice easing slightly, replaced by trust. We're counting on you. You can, Isabella replied. And the line went dead. She looked at Liam, who had listened to the exchange, his heart pounding. She had just made a promise that carried the weight of a child's life. You see, Liam, she said softly, the commander receding and the mentor returning. This is the risk. The prejudice of that one woman created this moment of extreme jeopardy. The failure was hers, but the responsibility to fix it is mine. It always is. That's why the contract had to be terminated. The stakes are too high for anything less than perfection. As they began their descent into New York, the city lights emerged from the darkness below, a breathtaking, sprawling galaxy of human endeavor. The landing was flawless. The moment the jet's wheels touched the tarmac, a black Monroe Dynamics vehicle was already pulling up beside it. The handover from Marcus, the onboard technician, to the waiting ground team was a silent, synchronized ballet of professionalism. The doors closed, and the vehicle, now joined by 2 NYPD cruisers, sped off into the night. During the ride into Manhattan in their own car, an unnerving silence fell between them. The mission was out of their hands now. All the power, all the planning had come down to a drive through late-night traffic and the skill of a surgical team. They were crossing the Triborough Bridge, the city's skyline, a glittering declaration of hope and ambition, when Isabella's phone lit up with a message. It was from David. Liam watched her face, trying to read her expression in the intermittent glow of the streetlights. She read the message, and for a second, nothing happened. Then he saw her shoulders, which had been subtly tensed for hours, finally relax. A long, slow breath escaped her lips, and then a smile, not the polite professional smile he was used to, but a genuine, radiant smile of profound relief and triumph spread across her face. She turned the phone so he could see it. It was a picture. A doctor in blue scrubs mask, pulled down, giving a tired but victorious thumbs up. The text below read, "Lungs are in. Vitals stable. Dr. Sharma says the girl is a fighter. And she says to thank you." Isabella leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes for the first time all day. The war had been won. The battle had been worth it. The cost, though immense, had purchased something priceless. "Never forget this, Liam," she said, her voice soft but resonant. "Never forget that what we do isn't about logistics or contracts or stock prices. It's about this. This is the only bottom line that matters." The story of Flight 762 would become a legend, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms about the day a quiet woman in joggers brought an airline to its knees. But for Isabella Monroe, looking out at the city that never sleeps, it was simply the day she had been forced to remind the world of a simple, immutable truth, that respect is not a courtesy to be offered, but the fundamental currency of business and life. And when that currency is refused, the debt incurred can be catastrophic. In the end, this wasn't just a story about an airline or a cancelled flight. It was about the hidden architecture of power and the quiet confidence of those who wield it. Dr. Isabella Monroe never raised her voice. She never made a threat. She simply refused to participate in a system that disrespected her. She reminded us that the most powerful statement isn't always a shout, but sometimes it's the silent, irreversible act of taking your business, your value, and your respect elsewhere. This story is a powerful lesson that prejudice, no matter how small or casual, can have consequences that ripple through careers, companies, and even the stock market. What would you have done in her position? Was her response justified? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you and you appreciate tales of quiet strength and profound consequences, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next story. Thank you for listening.